And hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative Live. We're doing a special edition tonight. Just me, no other guest with me, but I thought I'd be useful for everybody to go through the events of the day and the latest developments in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I appreciate you all being here. This is just a regular old-fashioned news report. There's no people are asking on the chat, but we are still all talking to you. We can still get your comments as we go through this. We really appreciate anything you have to say. I'll be monitoring the chat and responding to any questions. But tonight's show is important because we wanted to talk about some of the motivation maybe behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and some of it revolves around one of my favorite topics, of course, Jeffrey Epstein, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, the very latest from what happened today. Utah officials and the FBI are now saying that the shooting of Charlie Kirk was deliberate, targeted attack. That lines up with what we were saying yesterday, an assassination of a political figure. Commissioner Bo Mason of the Utah Department of Public Safety confirmed the shot came from a distance, possibly from a rooftop, which we'd identified yesterday as a possible location for that rooftop. Here's the graphic from MSNBC, where you could see over the Lassie Center is where the shots were reportedly fired from. We can also report to you that the same video that we showed you yesterday has proven to be accurate of at least where it took place. This is a video taken by students before the shooting, and you can see the man or woman on the rooftop there, or the outline of them, the silhouette of them. And this has now been proven to be accurate, connected to the yesterday's events. So we can say with a great amount of certainty that this shooting took place from that rooftop. Also today, we got pictures of the suspect, or at least one of the suspects, who was believed to have blended into the student body by wearing all dark clothing. Let's take a look at those images that we arrived at earlier. This could be a man, it could be a woman, says some people online, but it potentially is a man, is what we're looking at here, with a dark, long-sleeved, is it black, maybe black, sweatshirt. The logo on it, or the graphic on it, appears to be an American flag and the American bald eagle. I did some, amateur looking around on the internet today and found a similar kind of graphic, which I shall show you in a second. You guys can be the judge whether it's related to this image or not. I, of course, am not a professional investigator. I'll get to that in a minute because I don't seem to have it lined up right now, but I'll show it to you. Oh, here we go, actually. This, you can see it says here, home of the free and land of the free and home of the brave, and it's cut out in this particular graphic that I've lined up here. But it does look to me like a very similar kind of graphic. If you guys agree, let me know. I don't want to go out and put it publicly any further than our conversation here tonight, because I'm not quite sure it is the same, but it looks to me like a very, very, very similar to the images that we saw online. So let me take a look, revert back to the pictures of the suspect, or the so-called suspect, and let me see if I can get that to you in a full screen, so you can at least see the graphic on a full screen then, or maybe even split screen these two. That might work. Let me try this on the fly. I apologize. Sometimes we just got to do it this way. There you go. That's a better way of looking at it, I guess. I hope you can still hear me, but if you can still hear me, you should be able to see that there's some sort of similarity here. The only difference is the graphic on the left says land of the free, home of the brave, where on the actual image of the suspect, it doesn't look like that's there, or it looks in other pictures like it may be a little bit blurred out. So anyway, take your pick whether that's accurate or not. It certainly seems to me like the closest thing I could find online in terms of a link to the shooter or the shooting suspect. All right, let's see what else we found out today. The FBI has recovered what they believe is the weapon, a high-powered bolt-action rifle, and they've also collected various prints of the suspect's hands and his forearm, I believe, and they've also got other forensic evidence. We also know that there's a $100,000 reward if they receive information that could allow them to make an arrest of this person. There is still not a person in custody, and that's a really unusual thing. If this person was resident in the area, you would think someone would have recognized the outfit, would have recognized the person. Maybe they would have arrested them by now, but we just don't know who this person is. And yet there are some other really suspicious things that happened throughout the day today, revelations that came up, which made me really wonder about whether this person was just a local, perhaps politically radicalized person, or was this a much bigger professional kind of hit that happened? And it certainly begins to look to me like the professional hit, the potential of a professional hit by a foreign government. All these things sort of start to look a little bit more likely when you analyze some of the evidence around it. Now, I'm not saying any of this is a definite. I'm not saying all of this definitely happened at all, but there is an indication at least that some weird events happened yesterday with regards to a private plane. I'll go through with those. And then we'll also have to explore a little bit of the context. Charlie Kirk has been a long time supporter of Israel. There's no doubt about it. He's a devout Christian. He even tells Megyn Kelly that he practices the Shabbat. So this is not an anti-Semitic person at all. You can tell in his past speakings, in his public proclamations, he's been a big fan and supporter of Israel. Yet in recent weeks, as the Jeffrey Epstein revelations have come around, he has begun to ask some very serious questions, not just about Jeffrey Epstein, but about October 7th and about other events that Israel, has fed us a certain line. Maybe that line is not always accurate. And he started talking out about this, especially around the Epstein files. Now, we know, just in context of everything, we have been following doggedly the reveal of the FBI files from the Epstein case. We've been asking for these files to be released in an unredacted format for a long time. I've been covering the story for 8 years. This is a story that I'm very close to. It's a story that I'm particularly close to because I'm the reporter that first reported that Israeli military intelligence had acquired Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell as assets, as functioning assets for Israeli military intelligence, and were using them to blackmail politicians in the United States. This goes all the way back to the 1990s. That's a story that I broke, 8 years ago, maybe not, maybe 6 years ago. But and I've been covering the story ever since. It's been close to me since then. And right now I'm writing a series called The Greatest Heist, which looks at the much bigger picture of how these agents, or these assets, let's call them, of the Israeli military intelligence, how their blackmailing scheme was just one small part of a much bigger operation to really bankrupt America, to steal America's capitalist economy really from under its citizens, to steal American democracy from its citizens. And I've got that in The Greatest Heist. The next chapter I was going to put out today, but I'm actually going to hold off for a few days until we get a little bit more clarity on what we're seeing here. So let's listen to Charlie Kirk then, echoing some of my reporting. I'm not sure if you ever read my reporting. I know Candace Owens has covered my reporting before, and she's had it on her show, and I appreciate Candace Owens for doing that. I think it's a sign of important progress on everyone's side, that we can share each other's content where it's valid. And here is Charlie Kirk then talking about what he believed was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. And you'll see some of the same things that I uncovered in 2019 back again.
Realize that Epstein, with his little friend Ghislaine and Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, who was obviously a spy of the Israeli intelligence agencies, that there was something else going on here. Epstein was not some sort of whiz kid hedge fund manager. Epstein was playing a part. Epstein was a LARPer. Epstein was cast for a specific role, and he played it really well. The sweatpants and the Harvard jacket, the kind of disheveled hair, looking as if he was so smart and above the clouds that he was doing advanced mathematic equations on the back of napkins. But if you actually go into some of the videos of people that met with Epstein at the time, they said he was awfully unimpressive when it came to finance and markets and economics. And it's nothing new that if you're in the intel agencies, you want to try and get as much blackmail on powerful people as possible. Easy, not hard. And this is no longer just speculation. First of all, the evidence that shows that Epstein was a creation of either Mossad, Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, Saudi intelligence, or maybe he was just a hired gun. Maybe he was just the guy that countries would go to and park a couple $100 million and say, hey, can you get one of the members of the royal family with a 13-year-old so we can get them to do what we want to do? Members of Congress are actively being blackmailed. The Epstein playbook is being used on a daily basis. Jeffrey Epstein was not a financier. He was not a hedge fund manager. Jeffrey Epstein was a key player in a multi-decade blackmail operation against the most powerful people on the planet.
There's a dramatic statement, but it's not an inaccurate statement. You know, I have reported this many years ago, and I just want to repeat some of the things that he had spoken out there about. This is Charlie Kirk, a man who's very pro-Israel. In his recent reporting about Jeffrey Epstein, he's talking not about Jeffrey Epstein in the way that the Israeli government would want him to talk about that. He's calling him out for not being a financier, but a creation of the intelligence services, perhaps of Israel. And he also says there that it's part of a multi-decade blackmail operation, which is what I first reported in 2019, because that is what I was told by two very high-placed sources who knew this stuff. One of them was Ari Ben-Menashe, who was Robert Maxwell's personal handler and who worked for Israeli military intelligence. So if anyone had any ability to know whether Epstein worked for them and what the role was in terms of blackmail, it would be Ari Ben-Menashe. And you can see my reporting on that and my interview on that on various places, especially on the Substack, if you go to Narativ.org. He also says something that I think is really important for everyone to understand. He said that members of Congress were still being blackmailed today and urged the release of the Epstein files. So now you've got someone who is in the know because he's very connected to many of the Congress, especially on the GOP side and many of the politicians. He would know if there was members of Congress being blackmailed today. And what he seems to suggest is that the Epstein playbook, as he calls it, is still out there today and being used today to blackmail Congress members. Now, think of that in terms of the context of the reporting over the last few days. Just yesterday, we had a Senate vote that was defeated narrowly about the Epstein files, and there's a very contested discharge petition currently in the House waiting for someone to cross over the line now. I think it's 2017 or something like that in terms of the number of votes they have. And they need 2018 to just get a discharge petition to call for the release of the Epstein files, the unredacted Epstein files. But if you think about it, those Congress people who are voting, well, what he's saying here is that they are still being blackmailed today. So in other words, there is still an operation in the field to intimidate the Congress people, to intimidate our representatives in government, to not release these files. And I think that's a very critical point, considering the times that we have right now, and considering who was shot yesterday. Charlie Kirk is a friend of Israel's, or so we've always thought. So for him to be critical of Israel in any form is unusual. But for him to support the release of these FBI files, now that's lightning in terms of the criticism. So we've seen that this has not been a crowd pleaser, let's call it that, amongst the community that supports Donald Trump, like Laura Loomer. You know, Laura Loomer, who also used to be a fan of Charlie Kirk's, recently said she was not a fan of Charlie Kirk. And you might be able to see here the tweets she put out a few weeks ago, where she says, "I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again. After this weekend, I'd say he has revealed himself as a political opportunist, and I have had a front row seat to witness the mental gymnastics over the last 10 years. Lately, Charlie has decided to behave like a charlatan, claiming to be a pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. TPUSA was not able to thrive thanks to the generosity, it was only able to thrive thanks to the generosity of President Trump." So on the 1-year anniversary of the assassination attempt on Trump's life, Charlie hosted a guy named David Smith. This is according to Laura Loomer here. He's at Comic David Smith is the handle that he has on Twitter, at TPUSA's SAS conference, where Dave Smith was able to speak to a bunch of conservative youth at an organization that claims to be pro-Trump. And 3 weeks ago, Dave Smith had called President Trump to be impeached and removed because of his decision to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities. And she goes on and on and on and on. And I won't bore you with the whole thing. You can read it for yourself. But the reality of it is that the machine that runs Donald Trump, and I include Laura Loomer amongst that machine, was suddenly turning on Charlie Kirk, as he was turning in terms of his opinions about Jeffrey Epstein and about his criticism of Donald Trump, and especially as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein. So then what he does, he goes on Megyn Kelly's show, which is on YouTube these days. Of course, Megyn Kelly used to be a Fox News personality. She's hugely successful, hugely popular. And the two of them have obviously struck up quite a rapport, and are seen here talking about the whole event regarding David Smith and about the criticisms he's been getting. Before I play this, there's a little tweet cut off at the top there. It reflects someone's opinion, or that they'd heard from a secondhand source, that Charlie thought that Israel would kill him if he turned against them. I'm not supporting that idea. I'm not reporting that part. All I am reporting here, and I want you to try and separate what you're going to see on the screen here from what I'm telling you now, is the video. I want you to just look at the video clip below it, because this is the important piece, is how Charlie Kirk thought he was being really mistreated by the Jewish community, or aspects of the Jewish community, as he was trying to tell the story of what went on in Iran over that few weeks. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to try to play it in a different format here so you can see the whole tweet as well, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I'll switch it to the way it is. And of course, if you have any questions or anything else you'd like to share with me, I'm all ears. This is an important story. We've got to hear everyone's opinions. Maybe I'm misstepping here. Maybe I'm marching in the wrong direction. I don't know. But let's listen to Charlie Kirk talk to Megyn Kelly a few weeks ago.
The behavior by a lot, both privately and publicly, are pushing people like you and me away. Not like we're going to be pro-Hamas, not like we're going to, but we're like, honestly, the way you are treating me is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megyn, calling me an anti-Semite. I am learning biblical Hebrew and writing a book on the Shabbat. I honor the Shabbat, literally the Jewish Sabbath. I visit Israel and fight for it. And there's another article out in the Times of Israel today. I could read it on air. I was just reading before I got on. Charlie, what are you doing? Like, what am I doing? I'm sorry. Like, let's just take a step back here. Like, I'm an American citizen. Yes, I want Israel to win. Yes, I'm a Christian. But like, some of the mess, and you've seen how I've been treated, Megyn, by some, not all, by some.
No, it's very irritating.
It's
been so unfair. They were coming after you after Turning Point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. Again, I just want to repeat for the 5th time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put into question, Megyn. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this. And I could go, you saw it, Megyn. It was trending on Twitter, thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I were to be charitable and generous, I will say the people that are attacking me are in a hyper paranoid state, because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white, and you're a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm trying to be charitable, Megyn. Literally, I'm trying to cut as much slack as I can, right? Like, okay, what would it be like if all of a sudden I'm starting to see a pattern of behavior similar to what my grandparents saw in 1930s Germany online? How would I behave? So that's like my charitable kind of overcompensation spirit. At the same time, I'm like, but it's not defensible to be dumb, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it's offensive. It's offensive to those of us who have been out there defending them in many instances against critics on our own side. And now you have a couple of comments like, well, what about this? Well, has it gone on too long? Like, is it time to wrap it up? And the thing about Epstein is just so bizarre. I don't know who he was an agent for. It might have been Israel or an asset, or it might have been nobody. Yeah. But we're allowed to speculate about that. It's there's some rule. You can't go there when it comes to Israel.
Well, you and I believe that we're Americans and Americans first, period. End of story. We are citizens of this nation, okay?
That's right.
Israel, we have funded, we have supported, and they're up against a sea of Islamic totalitarianism, and we should be cheering for them, right? Because they're up against barbarians and monsters, and we want them to win. However, here is Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk combined, probably 30 million social media followers, like pretty, right? And you and I have been holding this down, and you probably get the negative, oh, you're just shilling for Israel, whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do what's right regardless of the feedback, right? But then all of a sudden, like, I host a person that I moderate the debate of, mind you, right? And I give equal time to Josh Hammer, equal time to a pro-Israel advocate, and my moral character is being put into question. And so I think it's a hyper paranoid, like, we're just going to try to, we're going to just stamp out everything type of practice. But it goes to the point where, if, for example, if I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government without backlash than actual Israelis do. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really weird, isn't it, Megyn? The behavior by a lot, both privately and publicly, are pushing people like you and me away. Not like we're going to be pro-Hamas, not like we're going to, but we're like, honestly, the way you are treating me is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megyn, calling me an anti-Semite. I am learning biblical Hebrew and writing a book on the Shabbat.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there because you get the general sense of what's going on here. I don't know what Charlie Kirk's affiliation to the Shabbat, or as he calls it, or Shabbat, is. I'm not sure if he's really practicing as Shabbat as other Jews might, or Jews might. I know that the feedback around Jeffrey Epstein has always been very loud from various sources online, whether they've been disinformation sources or bots or you name it. I've certainly had my fair share of harsh operations and critiques, really charging against my reporting that I had no credibility as a journalist and a whole bunch of other things. So I can just imagine what someone like Charlie Kirk, who's got the fame of Charlie Kirk, must have gone through in terms of the onslaught of criticism for his support of the story that Israel was part of the Jeffrey Epstein operation. So I take that with I take that as being kind of true, that he probably did receive a large amount of criticism for his support. And as we saw from Laura Loomer there, heavy-handed kind of attack on him and him personally as to who he is as an individual. And as he says, attacking his moral fiber. Whatever you take, I mean, it just seems remarkable to me that Charlie Kirk, who he grew up in the MAGA ranks, who certainly was so supportive of Donald Trump, you could argue that Donald Trump would not have been president the first time or the second time without Charlie Kirk's support and without his movement. And it seems to me that both him and Megyn Kelly and Candace Owen, I think what you've got there are a bunch of people who have seen the light to some extent. And however that light is getting to them, I applaud them for getting to that. However, clearly they could not use their voices in the way that they may have wanted to use them, because we saw what happened yesterday with Charlie Kirk and the awful events that led up to his assassination. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that there was this guy, this potential suspect. Everyone who has looked at this case, even though the distance that this particular shot was made, only 520 feet, not considered too sophisticated. But what is pretty sophisticated, it seems to a lot of people who are watching what happened yesterday, is that this person got away the way he did and that he's not been identified since. And there's a number of factors related to that. One of them is there was a decoy, or what some people call a decoy, but an early suspect that was and so everyone let guard down, which meant the suspect in this case might have made a getaway during that time. There was less people looking for him. But just the idea that there were 3,000 people at an event with security, not a lot, but still with security, and that he was able to get away after the shot, even with cameras identifying where he was right after that shot. Well, that to me is a telltale sign that this guy was a real professional, or this woman, who can't really tell the gender, but let's call it a man, was a true professional, a sharpshooter, an assassin of sort that knew how to get away in a high pressure situation. We don't know enough about that, but certainly that is the speculation. He certainly was a targeted assailant in this case. This was not an accident or an amateur shooting something at all, which leads you to the strange case of this jet, this really unusual private jet, and I have no way of knowing any more information than is available publicly. So take this one with a interesting but unconfirmed kind of report stance on this one, because why is it not showing up? There it is. What we have here is a private jet, and I'll get you the name of it in just a second. This is jet number N888KG, and it's a private jet that left Provo Airport, from nearby Provo Airport, nearby the campus over there, and it left at 1:15. So no one knows why it left at 1:15, but the unusual thing here is not that it left, but that it headed south towards Arizona, and then it vanished from radar about 15 minutes into their flight for 30 minutes. And then at 2 p.m., sort of reemerged from radar and returned to Provo. That's unusual. No one really knows why that's happening, although it's not so unusual because these things do happen. I mean, sometimes apparently these particular models of plane can do that, but it's still thoroughly unusual in terms of the timing. And I wanted to lay that timing out for you here on this timeline so you get a good sense of what it looks like. 12:10 to 12:20, Charlie Kirk gets shot by long-range sniper. Then you got the 9/11 calls, flood dispatch, people calling 9/11, asking people to join in reacting to this shooting. Then 12:21 is a really interesting thing. We'll park it for a second. Bibi Netanyahu posts on Twitter, on X, his condolences. At 1:15, you've got the Provo jet taking off and then it disappearing from radar at 1:30 p.m. for half an hour. And then at 2:05, it returns into that airspace at that airport. No one knows where it went. No one has any guidance of what it was. No one even is aware why this particular plane was allowed to take off at all under the circumstances that were going on. But that is a definite question. So let's get back to that really interesting, very early timed tweet from Bibi Netanyahu. Now, it's nothing unusual for Bibi Netanyahu to post about Charlie Kirk. There's nothing unusual at all about that. But the timing is kind of suspect here because, it happened so soon after the shooting. If you remember the timeline here, I'll just put it back up quickly. We're talking that this tweet came at 12:21. The events had just happened, just 12:10 to 12:20 is when we're saying the shooting happened. Maybe there's more precise timing out there, but just the coordination for Benjamin Netanyahu to come out with a statement so quickly like this is unusual, because this is the kind of thing that would first be handled domestically by the domestic leaders of any tragedy. They'd have an opportunity to say something first, and maybe in the hours afterwards or the days afterwards, then other countries, as they learn about things, could respond. But in this case, out came Bibi Netanyahu right away. And he says here, Charlie Kirk was murdered for speaking truth and defending freedom. A lion-hearted friend of Israel, he fought for the lies and stood for the Judeo-Christian civilization. I spoke to him only 2 weeks ago and invited him to Israel. Sadly, that will not take place. We lost an incredible human being. His boundless pride in America and his valiant belief in free speech will leave a lasting impact. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. What a personal statement. And it's interesting that 2 weeks ago he had a conversation with Charlie Kirk. This is unpreviously reported, but we know as well that Donald Trump had a conversation with Charlie Kirk a few weeks ago, asking him to stop covering the Epstein files. And for a day, Charlie did stop covering it. So what's going on here? I mean, I don't get calls from presidents or prime ministers of country, but I don't have the influence or the reach of Charlie Kirk. But still, this is remarkable that for him, within a short period of time, as he was ramping up these efforts to get people to release the Epstein files, the FBI files, that there was 2 calls, one from Bibi Netanyahu, one from Donald Trump. It has to factor into the equation of what's really going on here. And that's, there are other things that happened today, and I think it's important that people at least acknowledge that there were all these hand signals. I have no idea what the hand signals were. It seems like baseball hand signaling, but I didn't really know what that meant, and I couldn't find anything. There's other videos of people apparently cheering after the event. I can't reveal if that's true or not, because I can only find the one version of that video, so I don't want to climb into that. The other one is that the Jerusalem Post was first to report the killing. I can't confirm that either. So I'm not going to go that far as to say that we have anything other than an interesting set of circumstances, which politically I think are very important, because in the climate that we're having right now, this is the week where we just a few days ago were talking about Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book, and that lewd drawing that Donald Trump drew for his 50th birthday, and all these allegations in that book about him buying and selling women, or his attitude towards women, including that cartoon which showed him basically, picking up teenage girls, I guess. This is, that would have been the news cycle this week if we had not had the Charlie Kirk assassination. And so the fact that Charlie Kirk was also the reason that much of the MAGA movement had begun to move towards supporting the release of the FBI files, and as really hurting the Donald Trump base. Well, then it starts looking like there's the makings of a something there, makings of a political motive, perhaps, that not the one that we are all expecting, but certainly one that is plausible. Now, I'm not going to tell anyone to say this is it. This is not. This is certainly a line of questioning that needs to be questioned. It is not. I'm not suggesting this is the motivation of the shooter. I'm not even suggesting the shooter knew anything about this. All I'm saying is the context that we are currently seeing and the reaction by the prime minister, the fact that this was a very organized hit that smacks of the kind of thing that you might want to use someone like a sharpshooter who was working for an intelligence agency. All these things, they tend to lead you to that conclusion, but we have nothing solid, of course, other than we can analyze the times that we have. We have this unusual jet activity. We have the fact that this guy was girl was a very proficient shooter. The fact that he got away. The fact that Charlie Kirk has been outspoken for weeks about the Epstein files, and the fact that Laura Loomer recently turned against him. And we know that Laura Loomer is very connected to both Trump and the Israelis. So take that for what it's worth. I will keep updating the story. I don't have anything more conclusive to say, although I do see that they're going to have, in an hour from now, a press conference on the Kirk shooter. And if I'm around, I will try to bring that to you live, because I think that in the context of what we've been discussing, it would be important for us to see that. So it's now 8:34. Let's say at 9:30, when they start this press conference, if they stick to it this time, we will bring you that coverage. They may have, who knows, they may have got the shooter. It's certainly the kind of thing that we would expect after the hold back that they gave us today. They gave us an earlier time for a press conference, but then landed up pushing it back, partly because of and let's just eavesdrop here, shall we? I mean, we can't do this, so let's just listen to what they're saying on MSNBC here.
Of the shooting right here in Evergreen, the community's really come together, faith leaders, business leaders, the school board to show support and solidarity with the students and the teachers.
I can't.
Here. I was going to ask you about that. What is the latest there on the shooting at Evergreen High School?
So the perpetrator died from a self-inflicted wound. The other two victims that were shot are in the hospital. We hope for their recovery. I was just talking to some students outside. I said, when they return to Evergreen High School, you need to give them a hero's welcome. And really, thanks to the early actions of the teachers and staff, it could have been a lot worse. The lockdown worked as anticipated, and what a horrible thing that we have to do lockdown drills in our schools. But thank goodness we do, because this would have been a lot worse had Jefferson County Schools and Evergreen not been able to follow the
I'm going to
protocols.
let that keep going. I don't want to steal that coverage.
But
I would back
you worked so closely before with the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox.
And take a listen to the conversation and the press conferences they have it. That's our coverage from Narrative tonight on the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Please stay with us as we continue to cover this important story. It's not going away, and it certainly has a huge impact on the future of America and American democracy.